Inside Out 2, directed by Kelsey Mann, stars Amy Poehler and Hawke. While his mind headquarters is undergoing a sudden demolition to make room for something entirely unexpected, which are new emotions, and when anxiety shows up, the other emotions don't know how to feel. I begrudgingly went to see this movie, initially out of obligation to make this video. However, along with this, I went out of curiosity due to the fact that this movie was getting a lot of praise from both critics and audience alike for once. Given the recent announcement that Pixar is basically going to give up on original stories and stories that are basically autobiographical from their respected directors, I almost didn't want to see this movie out of spite for this reason, because the consensus was if this movie succeeded, we would basically be seeing Pixar sequels for a good long while. And at the moment, this movie is making absolute bank at the box office, so get ready for a Toy Story film every 5 years. Firstly, I want to talk about the voice performances in this movie and address the changes in them. First of all, two actors that were removed from this movie were Bill Hader and Mindy Kaling. The latter, I'm gonna assume, was removed for making a show like Velma. And while there was times I did personally miss the vocal talents of Bill Hader, his replacement did actually do a decent job at doing his best to replicate his voice, so it didn't become too distracting, and this new voice actor managed to do just as much of a good job as he did. On to good jobs, some of the new characters were very interesting to see here. I think Hawke did a really great job in her role. She naturally has this neurotic voice, so casting her as anxiety felt like the best decision. She handles the role really well, and along with that, I think her character is very well written. The trailers portray her to be the villain, but without spoiling anything too much due to certain events and how her character is written, I wouldn't go as far to call anxiety a full-on villain in this movie. It's the closest thing to it, and obviously this emotion is more of a villain in real life, but the writers do decide to give a point of view of her character that makes sense in context of the movie. I thought Ayo Edebiri's character was a cool addition too. She lends her voice really well to voice acting with how expressive she can be. I also love the little details in her character's design. Her character is envy, so they've animated her to be less proportionate than the other emotions. It's a nice detail to see. I really liked how they handled the character of anger in this movie. They give him more dimensions in this than the first, which is understandable as the dynamic in this movie changes. Rather than the dynamic of sadness and joy, we see joy paired with anger, disgust, and fear. The other two are handled decently, but I think anger is the one they really gave a good bit of attention to, and it's nice to see. There's a particular moment between anger and joy, and the way the vocal performances are done and how the interaction is written, it's done really well, and it's a nice moment in the film. The story in this film I felt was a lot better than the first. It's a lot more engaging, and while it borrows elements from the first film, mainly the concept of the A to B plot, which was not only in the first film but a handful of Pixar films, they still do some interesting things with this concept, especially in terms of its world building. There's new things introduced in this film that I thought were cool, and seeing previous elements from the first movie be expanded upon in this was really appreciated. I think the only real weakest part of not just this film but the previous one is whenever we get to the human characters. These movies obviously focus more on the emotions, and that's fine, because that's what people want to see. But when the human characters appear, they never really do much and don't feel as developed as they should be, but these scenes don't dwell on too long, so it's not a big issue. The animation in this film was really great looking. There's a scene I really appreciated where there's a bunch of characters introduced and each character is drawn in their own individual animation style. This feels like a small thing, but when most animation companies just stick with the usual 3D animation, and I know there's been a spike in the Spider-Verse style of animation, which is 3D, but it has more style to it, which always looks better. The fact that this film was able to incorporate different forms of animation is really appreciated. They go as far to give these characters their own frame rates too, which is another detail that is great to see. On top of this, there's just many moments of really beautiful looking animation in this film, especially in terms of its colors and how vibrant it is. I really loved looking at the movie. The score in this film was also really good too. There's a load of really beautiful sounding tracks in this film that suit a load of their scenes. I can't recall much of the music from the first movie, but there was a lot of moments in this film where they worked and sounded great. Overall, I thought this was a pretty good movie and a very worthwhile sequel that clearly has a lot of care and passion put into it. The only downside to this being a good film is that the after effects of this is going to see Pixar basically doing sequels for the rest of time until people decide to get sick of it. But if they decide to put this much effort into these new sequels, then it might not be the worst thing in the world. I'm giving Inside Out 2 4 stars. This is a sequel that not only lives up to the first movie, but I think is much better than the first movie. There's such a really good heart to it. There's some decent enough humor that audiences young and old will enjoy. It really evokes the essence of a good Pixar sequel, and I had a nice time watching this. I definitely recommend checking it out.